The next concept, path dependence. Again, path dependence is a very useful analytical tool that historians or historically minded scholars apply in their analysis. Let's discuss it with some examples. For example, imagine yourself like hiking or running in a, let's say, complicated trail. And your way is bifurcated. So there are two routes that you might choose. And you don't know which one brings you to your car. So you randomly choose one of them. But like after running or hiking along this new route for 1 hour, actually you realize that it was not the right one. However, now it is much more costly for you to return back to the starting point where the road is bifurcated and switch to the other path. So the idea is once you go into a path, actually it reinforces your initial decision, no matter it was a random one or not. And it became harder for you to return back to the initial condition and change your option. For example, like we are all, I'm assuming that we are all using the QWERTY keyboards, right? Actually, we are using these keyboards as a result of some very uh, interesting incidents. Like the companies at that time, like they actually deliberately devised these QWERTY keyboards to slow the pace of typewriters at that time because to prevent the destruction of their devices. So it was deliberately designed in a way to slow typing process. However, since like people like the typewriters at that time, since they learned like these keyboard design, and since the first, let's say, companies or let's say machineries just emulated the same keyboard design, so today we are all socialized into this way of writing, and it is costlier for us to just switch to F keyboard, or it is costlier for the manufacturing companies to just readjust their line of production and produce F keyboards. So it has been sort of universalized. So the logic used in the selection of Q keyboards is not relevant anymore. Actually, it is very acting to the disadvantage of users, but we are having difficulties to change it. Or imagine, let's say, yourself uh, at the age of 17 or 18, you are expected to choose your major. And more or less, we are giving a sort of random decisions there. So based on what we like to do at the age of 17 or 18. However, it might turn out to be a wrong decision. However, let's say once you choose your major, actually you will specialize on a topic. You will gain the skills related to your area of study, and it will be harder for you, let's say, to change or to shift or switch from law school to medical school. Yeah, because you need to rewind the process and maybe lose 5 or 6 years to just change it. It's not impossible, but it is harder or it is much more costlier for you. So you are more likely to stick with the path that you already decided on. Again, there are two examples here that you will that you will watch at home. So these are examples like relevant to the politics of secularism in France and United States, and why it is different, and also local politics in Arbor and Jackson, and why these two neighboring towns are so different from one another. So the analysis of these differences through the concept of path dependence, so that you can see how beneficial and how useful this concept is. And also, like, these two maps actually show like kind of a historical parallel here. So the let's say military routes that the Roman Empire took like just 15 or 16th century ago actually showed great parallels to the regions in Europe today which have a higher degree of economic activity and prosperity. So, although this was a random or sort of discrete selection or attempt at that time, just taken like 15th or 16th century ago, but it still shapes the contemporary distribution of economic or material resources, or it influences the contemporary world. So, history has an impact on how the contemporary life is experienced or organized. Again, a related idea to the concept of path dependence. Okay. So the next one, necessary and sufficient conditions. Actually, it is better to analyze it like with some examples. For example, or the basic definition is if the occurrence of Y is, let's say, guaranteed by the presence of X, then X is the sufficient condition of Y. For example, like in United States, a presidential candidate, if they get more than 270 or sorry 268 or 70, I don't remember exactly number, electoral college votes, then they will be elected as the president of United States, right? So it is sufficient for a presidential candidate to get the necessary number of elected college votes to become the president. You can guarantee your presidency by getting this number of elected college votes. And the necessary condition, however, in every occurrence of Y, if A exists, or sorry, if X should be there, or if X should exist, then X is the necessary condition of Y. Again, through the same example, like in order to become a president in the United States, you need to be older than 35, right? So becoming older than 35 is the necessary condition of becoming an American president. But it is not sufficient, right? So like like everyone older than 35, they are not becoming American president. It is impossible. So it is not a sufficient condition, but it's a necessary one. You need to have this prior condition to aim for American presidency. Let me ask you another example. So, like, is it necessary condition of, let's say, getting 270 electoral college votes for someone to become an American president? Just think on it for a few seconds. It is sufficient, we discussed, but I am asking whether it is necessary or not. Actually, it is not. So we know, like for example, Lyndon B. Johnson became the American president after the assassination of Kennedy, or Gerald Ford became the president after the resignation of Richard Nixon, or Henry Truman became the president after the death of FDR, Roosevelt, or Andrew Johnson became the president after the assassination of Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. So it is not a necessary condition. So there are many examples of American presidents which didn't meet the condition of gaining more than 270 electoral college votes. Okay? So this is not a necessary condition. Counterfactual analysis. It is a very simple one. So it is referring to the question of what if, and it allows us to understand or comprehend the contingency of the history. For example, like let's assume that Adolf Hitler died in a car accident when he was 8. So would World War II and the Holocaust still happen if he was dead in a car accident. You can argue yes, they would be, or you can argue no. So we would, let's say, avoid these like unfortunate events or destructive events. And if you say that no, we would avoid, then you are arguing that the occurrence of these events, like the World War II, the eruption of World War II, and the occurrence of genocide, Holocaust, actually was contingent upon the presence of Adolf Hitler as the German Chancellor at that time. So, like counterfactual analysis, or let's say you might remember the chapter on Zhang He's voyage, the Chinese admiral voyage in mid 15th century. It was a very important one, right? So, Chinese Empire at that time had an enormous navy capacity that an other power could only catch up with during the World War II. So after 500 years later, that another naval power could reach out to the capacity of Chinese Navy in mid 15th century. So we are talking about enormous power here, right? However, like Zheng He, actually they did, and Chinese Empire at that time, they didn't consider to colonize the territories that they visited. They could easily do that. So they were enormously powerful at that time compared to the other regions. However, they didn't choose to do that. And actually, this fleet or this navy has been withdrawn as a result of the changing dynasty in Chinese Empire. So, if this navy was not withdrawn, and if it chose to like colonize or occupy the territories that it visited, then the course of the history would possibly develop very differently. And we would be living in a quite different world right now. So again, we are like by thinking on that or by reflecting on these possibilities, actually again we are using the analytical tool of counterfactuality here. So it's again a very useful one to imagine alternative histories and to grasp the significance of contingency in the making of history. Okay, these are the analytical tools that we will that we will cover today. Thank you so much for listening my brief lecture. Uh, I will post some videos and discussion questions on the Blackboard page. Please reflect and comment on these resources and questions and the answers of your peers so that we can develop a mutually intellectual environment. Take care of yourself. See you in the next video next week.